In the busy city of Enugu, where dreams and noise fill the streets, a young woman named Kamsi Okafor worked quietly in a big fashion house. She was a junior designer, the kind of girl who arrived early, stayed late, and smiled even when no one noticed her. Her dream was simple: to one day create designs that would be worn by women across Africa. But inside that shiny office, she often felt invisible. Her colleagues never missed a chance to mock her. They laughed at her old shoes, whispered about her thrift store handbags, and rolled their eyes at her thick Enugu accent. Sometimes, when pressure became too much, Kamsi's eyes would fill with tears, and instead of kindness, all she received was laughter. They called her the emotional one, as if caring deeply was a flaw. But what they didn't see was the fire burning quietly inside her. Every time they laughed, she whispered to herself, "One day, I'll give them something real to talk about." She didn't know when or how, but deep in her heart, she believed her pain would one day become her power, and that belief was the only thing that kept her going. It happened on a hot Monday morning, the kind that already felt heavy before it even began. Kamsi had spent weeks working on her new fashion design for the company's big presentation. She had poured her whole heart into it, staying late after hours, skipping meals, sketching by the dim light of her phone when the power went out. Her design was bold, inspired by African queens, mixing tradition with modern beauty. It was her chance to finally prove she was more than just the quiet girl in the corner. But when her turn came to present, something strange happened. Her file wouldn't open. The entire design gone. Deleted. Kamsi's hands trembled as she searched through the folders, praying it was just a mistake. Then she looked up and saw the smirk on Chioma's face, her supervisor, the woman who had always seen Kamsi as a threat. "Maybe next time you'll back up your work," Chioma said loudly, pretending to be helpful. The room burst into laughter. Kamsi tried to speak, to explain that she had saved it the night before, but her voice broke under the weight of their mocking eyes. Someone whispered, "She's crying again." And that was it. More laughter, sharp and cruel. Each giggle felt like a slap. She stood there, frozen, her dream falling apart in front of everyone. Her heart pounded painfully, but she refused to run. She stood tall, wiped her tears quietly and whispered, "Thank you," before walking out. Her dignity was all she had left. That night, in her small apartment, she sat by the window staring at the city lights. The laughter still echoed in her head, but this time it didn't make her cry, it made her burn inside. She clenched her fists and whispered through her tears, "One day they'll remember this moment, but not for the reasons they think." She didn't know it yet, but that heartbreak had just planted the seed of her greatest comeback. That night, the rain fell hard on the roof of Kamsi's small apartment. The city outside was noisy and alive, but her little room felt like another world, quiet, lonely, and heavy with disappointment. She sat by the window, hugging her knees, watching the raindrops race down the glass. Her mind kept replaying the laughter from the office, the fake smiles, the whispers, the humiliation. It hurt so much that her chest ached. She had worked so hard, believed so deeply, and yet they had crushed her like she was nothing. For a moment she wanted to give up, to walk away from fashion, from the pain, from everything. But something inside her refused to die. A small voice whispered, "Kamsi, they haven't seen your story yet." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, stood up slowly, and pulled out her old sketchbook, the one she hadn't touched since her mother died. The pages were wrinkled and smudged with pencil marks, but to her they still carried hope. She picked up her pencil, and as the rain continued to fall, she began to draw. Her lines were not neat this time. They were fierce, emotional, alive. Every stroke came from a place of pain and strength mixed together. She sketched bold African patterns, long flowing dresses with power in every curve, designs that told stories of women who rose after being broken. Hours passed, but she didn't notice. The storm outside started to calm, and dawn slowly crept through the window. Her eyes were tired, but her spirit was awake like never before. Looking at her sketches, she felt something new. Not sadness, not anger, but purpose. She whispered softly, "One day they will see these tears were not weakness, they were fuel." And in that quiet promise, a new version of Kamsi was born. Not the girl they mocked, but the woman who would one day make them remember her name. Weeks passed after that rainy night, and Kamsi didn't stop drawing. Every evening after work, she came home, turned on her small fan, and worked on her handmade designs. She didn't have a studio or fancy tools, Just her sewing machine, a few rolls of fabric, and endless passion. She began sharing pictures of her pieces online, posting them on social media under the name House of Eem, a tribute to her late mother, Eem, who once told her, "Crying doesn't make you weak, my daughter. Staying down does." First, her posts got almost no likes, sometimes only 1 or 2 comments, from friends who barely noticed her work. But she kept going. She styled her clothes on herself, took pictures with her phone, and used natural light from her window to make them shine. Her designs were raw, bold, and full of African soul, bright Ankara prints, flowing sleeves, and deep meanings behind every stitch. She didn't know it, but her persistence was about to pay off. One quiet Sunday afternoon, as she was scrolling through her notifications, she saw a message from a man named Mr. Lunda, a brand consultant from South Africa. Her heart skipped. He wrote, "Your designs are pure art, modern yet deeply African. I would love to discuss a possible collaboration with you." Kamsi stared at the message for a long time, unsure if it was real. People had ignored her for so long that she almost forgot what genuine appreciation felt like. She replied nervously, thanking him and agreeing to a video call. During the call, Mr. Lunda spoke warmly, praising her creativity and passion. He told her he had been searching for an authentic African designer to work with for his upcoming fashion project. "You have something special," he said. "You don't just make clothes, you tell stories." When the call ended, Kamsi sat frozen for a moment. Then she covered her mouth and cried. Not out of sadness this time, but gratitude. That one message, that one moment of recognition had just opened the door. 4 days, Kamsi couldn't stop thinking about the opportunity with Mr. Lunda. It felt like a dream knocking at her door, but fear whispered in her ear every night. What if it failed? What if she wasn't ready? What if she lost everything? She had a stable job, even if it made her miserable, and quitting it meant walking into uncertainty. But every time she remembered how they laughed at her, something inside her refused to settle. She was done being the quiet girl everyone overlooked. She wanted to build something that had her name, her story, her strength. One morning after a long sleepless night, she stood in front of the mirror, took a deep breath, and whispered to her reflection, "It's time." She wrote her resignation letter with shaking hands, but with a calm heart. When she dropped it on her supervisor's desk, Chioma raised an eyebrow. "You're quitting? To do what?" she asked mockingly. Kamsi smiled gently and replied, "To build what you said I never could." Then she walked out, her head held high. With her small savings and the support of Mr. Lunda, she began working on her dream, her own fashion brand. She named it House of Eem after her late mother, the woman who had believed in her long before anyone else did. Her mother's words echoed in her heart every day. "Crying doesn't make you weak, staying down does." Her apartment became her workshop. The floor was covered in fabric, threads, and sketches. She had no fancy machines, no team, no office, just a deep belief that her pain had a purpose. She worked through long nights stitching each dress by hand, praying over every piece. When exhaustion hit, she would sit by the window, look up at the stars, and remind herself, "I didn't come this far to stop now." That leap of faith didn't just change her career. It changed her soul. For the first time, Kamsi wasn't chasing anyone's approval. She was finally building her own dream, one stitch at a time. Starting House of Eem felt exciting at first, like finally breathing after years of being held underwater. But soon, reality hit hard. Kamsi realized dreams were beautiful, but they also came with bills. Rent was due every month, fabrics were expensive, and suppliers didn't take her seriously because she was a small designer with no big name. Some clients promised to pay and disappeared. Others complained, bargained too much, or criticized her work. There were days she sat on the floor, surrounded by unfinished dresses, wondering if she had made a huge mistake. Her savings ran low faster than she expected. Sometimes, she ate only once a day, using her food money to buy fabric instead. Her sewing machine broke down more than once, and she had to borrow money to fix it. There were nights when she worked until dawn, her eyes burning and her fingers sore, sewing under a flickering bulb because there was no electricity again. Yet, every time she felt like quitting, she remembered that office, the laughter, the whispers, the humiliation. That memory became her silent fire. When she looked in the mirror, she saw dark circles under her eyes, but also something stronger, determination. She began to smile even through the pain, Not because life was easy, but because she refused to give up. Each tear she shed while stitching reminded her of where she came from and where she was headed. Some evenings, neighbors would pass by and hear her humming softly as she worked. They didn't know that behind that small voice was a woman fighting to turn her pain into power. And even though her fingers sometimes bled from sewing too much, she would simply bandage them and keep going. Because deep down Kamsi knew, the same people who once laughed at her tears would one day wear her designs. And that thought kept her spirit alive. One sunny afternoon, Kamsi received a message that made her heart race. A Lagos-based fashion influencer named Zuri had seen one of her Ankara designs online and loved it. She asked if Kamsi could make a custom version for an upcoming red carpet event. At first, Kamsi thought it was a joke. Zuri had millions of followers. She could wear anything from any designer. Why her? But Zuri said she admired how real and raw Kamsi's designs felt. They tell stories, she wrote. That one message filled Kamsi with both fear and excitement. For days, she worked on the dress like her life depended on it. She poured every ounce of creativity, emotion, and love into the fabric. She stitched through the night, redoing every tiny detail until it was perfect. When Zuri finally came to pick it up, she gasped. This is not just fashion, it's art, she said softly. Kamsi smiled shyly, not knowing that her whole world was about to change. A few days later, the Lagos event took over social media. Zuri walked in wearing Kamsi's bold Ankara masterpiece, a mix of gold, red, and deep African prints that shimmered under the lights. Cameras flashed non-stop. Within hours, photos of the outfit were everywhere, on blogs, news pages, and fashion accounts. People couldn't stop talking. Who designed this? Where can I buy it? Who is Kamsi Okafor? Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Emails, messages, and calls flooded in. Clients from Ghana, Kenya, South Africa. Even the UK wanted her designs. She sat there, staring at her screen, tears rolling down her cheeks. All those long nights, all those rejections, all that pain. It had finally turned into something beautiful. That night, as she lay in bed, she whispered softly, "Thank you, God. They laughed when I cried, but now they're calling my name." For the first time, Kamsi felt seen. Not as the girl they mocked, but as the woman who had turned her tears into a masterpiece. As Kamsi's design spread across Africa, her name started showing up everywhere. In magazines, fashion blogs, and even on TV interviews. House of Eem had become a symbol of modern African beauty, and people couldn't stop talking about her. Meanwhile, back at her old company, things were falling apart. Clients began leaving, complaining that their collections felt tired and uninspired. The same team that once laughed at Kamsi now sat around meeting tables, trying to figure out why their glow had faded. It didn't take long before her name came up in conversations. First they tried to ignore it, but as her fame grew, it became impossible. One of the managers finally said during a meeting, "Maybe we should consider working with her." Chioma, sitting at the head of the table, forced a smile, pretending not to be bothered. But deep down she felt a sting of regret. The girl she once humiliated had become the woman everyone now admired. One afternoon, as Kamsi was sketching a new design, an email notification popped up on her laptop. She opened it and froze for a moment. It was from Chioma. The subject line read, "Collaboration Proposal." Her eyes scanned the message slowly. Chioma's tone was overly polite, almost too sweet. She praised Kamsi's recent success and said the company would be honored if she could design a special collection with them. Kamsi leaned back in her chair, a soft smile forming on her lips. It was almost unreal, the same woman who once deleted her designs now asking for her creativity. She didn't reply immediately. She simply looked out the window, watching the sunset paint the city gold, and whispered, "The tables have turned." Later that evening, she drafted a calm, professional response. "Thank you for reaching out," she wrote. "I'll consider it." No bitterness. No harsh words. Just quiet power. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than revenge. And Kamsi had finally learned that success is the sweetest reply to mockery. Weeks later, the day finally came. Kamsi was officially invited to her old company as a guest consultant, the same place that once made her cry in front of everyone. As her car pulled up in front of the tall glass building, she took a deep breath. For a second, memories flashed through her mind. The laughter, the humiliation, the pain. But then she smiled. That version of her was gone. Today, she wasn't the quiet girl they mocked. She was the woman they now admired. When the driver opened her door, the air changed. Cameras clicked instantly as photographers and staff turned to look. Kamsi stepped out gracefully, dressed in an elegant royal blue African gown that shimmered under the sunlight. Her head wrap was bold. Her gold earrings danced in the breeze, and her confidence spoke louder than any words could. People stopped and stared, whispering her name like it carried power. Inside the lobby, workers who once ignored her now rushed to greet her. Some forced smiles, others bowed their heads in guilt. Kamsi walked past them politely, greeting everyone with calm grace. She didn't need to show anger. Her presence alone was a statement. The same office that once felt like a battlefield now felt like a victory ground. When she reached the conference room, the team was already waiting. The room went silent the moment she entered. Even Chioma, who used to look down on her, stood up nervously. Kamsi smiled and said softly, "Good morning, everyone." Her voice was calm, confident, and full of quiet power. As she sat down, flashes from cameras continued outside the glass walls. Everyone could see her, not as a victim but as a success story. That moment was more than just a business meeting. It was history rewriting itself. Kamsi looked around, her heart full but steady. The place that once broke her spirit now opened its doors to her with respect. She didn't need revenge. Her presence was enough, silent, strong, and unforgettable. The meeting began with forced smiles and nervous laughter. Everyone in the room tried to act comfortable, but the tension was thick enough to feel. Kamsi sat at the end of the long table, calm and composed, dressed in a soft white outfit that made her glow under the lights. Her notebook was open, her pen resting gently on the page. Across from her sat Chioma, the same woman who once deleted her designs, now pretending nothing had ever happened. "Wow, Kamsi," Chioma began, flashing a practiced smile. "We're so proud of you. You've come so far. We always knew you had potential." Her tone sounded sweet, but her eyes told another story, a mix of jealousy and regret. Kamsi looked at her for a moment, studying the woman who had once made her cry in front of a whole office. Then she smiled softly, not with anger but with quiet grace. "Thank you," she said in a calm voice. "Your laughter taught me more than your lessons ever could." The room froze. The sound of the air conditioner was suddenly louder than their breathing. No one dared to move or speak. Chioma's fake smile slowly disappeared, replaced by embarrassment. Her colleagues looked away, pretending to check their notes, but the silence spoke louder than any apology could. Kamsi didn't gloat or push further. She simply continued the meeting as if nothing had happened, talking about fabrics, new trends, and her design philosophy. Her confidence filled the room. Her words carried weight. Everyone could see that this wasn't the same girl they used to mock. When the meeting ended, people clapped lightly, more out of respect than formality. As Kamsi stood to leave, she looked around the room and smiled again. Not with pride but with peace. She had finally faced her past. Not with anger but with power. And deep down, everyone in that room knew they would never forget that moment. The day the girl they once laughed at taught them what true strength looks like. After the meeting, everyone expected Kamsi to act proud or distant, to use her success as a weapon against those who once broke her spirit. But she didn't. Instead, she carried herself with quiet grace, the kind that made people question their own hearts. The management team gathered again the next day to finalize the collaboration. When Kamsi walked in, the room fell silent. They were ready for demands or attitude, but what they got instead was kindness. She smiled warmly and said, "Before we talk business, I want to say something." Her voice was calm but full of emotion. "I didn't come back to remind anyone of my pain. I came to prove that strength can wear a smile." The words hung in the air like music, soft but powerful. Even Chioma, sitting across the table, couldn't meet her eyes. She kept fidgeting with her pen, ashamed and speechless. Kamsi continued, "Life taught me something important. Forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. I'm not here to win against anyone. I'm here to build something that inspires others." Then she opened her laptop and presented a fair partnership proposal. She offered her designs and creative direction, but made sure everyone, even the junior designers, would benefit from the deal. Her kindness shocked them more than any revenge could have. The same people who once called her too emotional were now watching her lead with calm confidence. Her humility didn't make her smaller. It made her shine brighter. When the meeting ended, several employees quietly came up to her, thanking her for her grace and courage. Even Chioma whispered, "You're different, Kamsi. Stronger than I ever imagined." Kamsi smiled gently and replied, "We all grow, Chioma, some through pain, some through reflection." Then she walked out of the room, her head high, her heart light. She had learned that true power doesn't need to shout, it simply shines. And that day, her light filled every corner of the building that once tried to dim her. In the months that followed, Kamsi's brand, House of Eem, became more than just a fashion label. It became a movement. Her designs carried a story in every stitch, a message in every color. African women everywhere connected with her work because it wasn't just about beauty. It was about identity, confidence, and pride. Her bold Ankara gowns, flowing Kent jackets, and elegant beadwork caught attention on red carpets from Lagos to Johannesburg. Magazines called her the heart of African fashion. Orders came in from all over the world, celebrities, diplomats, and even brides wanted her creations. But what touched Kamsi the most wasn't fame or money. It was the letters she received from young girls who said her story gave them hope. Many wrote, "If Kamsi could rise after all that pain, maybe I can too." Those words reminded her why she started in the first place. Instead of keeping her success to herself, Kamsi opened a small training center under House of Eem. She began teaching young girls who couldn't afford fashion school. Some came from rural areas, some were orphans, and others were women who had once been told they'd never make it. Kamsi didn't just teach them how to sew, she taught them how to believe in themselves again. During her first class, she looked around at the eager faces and said softly, "Your tears can become your thread. Every pain you feel can shape something beautiful if you let it." The room went silent, some girls even tearing up. They saw not just a successful woman, but a living example of resilience. Soon, House of Eem became known not just for fashion, but for empowerment. Each new design carried her story, from the girl they laughed at to the woman they now celebrated. And in every stitch of fabric, in every dress that graced a runway, Kamsi wove one message: true beauty begins when pain turns into purpose. Months later, the night Kamsi had never even dared to dream of finally came. She stood backstage at the African Fashion Excellence Awards, one of the biggest nights in the continent's fashion world. Her heart was pounding, not out of fear but disbelief. She looked stunning in a gold and blue gown she had designed herself, a piece inspired by her own journey. The golden patterns represented her triumphs, while the deep blue fabric symbolized the tears that once fell silently in her small apartment. Together they told the story of her rise, pain stitched into power. When her name was announced as Designer of the Year, the crowd erupted into applause. Flashlights flickered everywhere as she walked onto the grand stage, her head held high, her smile calm but full of emotion. She could barely see through the lights, but she could feel the energy, people cheering for the same woman who once sat alone crying over broken dreams. As she held the microphone, she paused for a moment, her eyes glistening. "A few years ago," she began softly, "I was just a girl crying in a small room in Enugu, wondering if my dreams mattered. Tonight, those tears have become diamonds of success." The audience went silent, hanging on her every word. "This award isn't just mine," she continued. "It belongs to every woman who was ever told she wasn't enough. Don't let their laughter break you. Let it build you." Tears rolled down her cheeks as the crowd rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. It was more than an award, it was redemption. The girl they once mocked was now standing at the top, shining in her own light. As she stepped off stage, Kamsi looked up at the bright lights above her and smiled through her tears. In that moment she realized, her story wasn't just about fashion. It was about faith, courage, and every broken piece she turned into something beautiful. After the award ceremony, as the crowd began to clear and photographers packed up their cameras, Kamsi stepped outside to breathe in the cool night air. The lights of Lagos sparkled all around her, and for the first time in years, she felt truly at peace. She had made it, not just to success but to healing. As she turned to leave, she heard a soft, familiar voice behind her. "Kamsi." She turned around slowly. It was Chioma. The same woman who once mocked her tears and destroyed her work now stood before her with trembling hands and teary eyes. Her once confident posture was gone. She looked smaller, humbled, human. For a moment time froze between them, the past and the present staring at each other in silence. Chioma took a shaky breath and said, "Kamsi, I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't realize how much I hurt you. I was jealous, and I let my pride control me. Her voice cracked, and she lowered her head in shame. Kamsi looked at her quietly. She could still remember those painful days, the laughter, the humiliation, the lonely nights. But standing there now, she felt something stronger than anger. Peace. She smiled softly and said, "You don't owe me anything, Chioma. Life already balanced the scales." Chioma looked up, eyes wide, unable to believe the kindness in Kamsi's voice. "You really forgive me?" she asked. Kamsi nodded gently. "Yes, because holding on to pain would only keep me where you left me. And I've come too far to go back." Tears filled Chioma's eyes as she whispered, "Thank you." Kamsi placed a hand on her shoulder and smiled warmly. "We all fall. But what matters is that we rise wiser, softer, stronger." As Chioma walked away, wiping her tears, Kamsi watched her disappear into the crowd. The night breeze brushed against her face, and she closed her eyes with a deep sigh of gratitude. Forgiveness, she realized, was the final thread that completed her masterpiece, the one woven not with fabric, but with grace. That night, Kamsi stood on the balcony of her penthouse, looking out over the glittering city that once made her cry. The cool evening breeze brushed against her skin, carrying memories of long nights, silent tears, and the cruel laughter that once echoed in her ears. Now that same city glowed with billboards and magazines showcasing her designs. House of written in elegant gold letters everywhere she looked. It felt like the universe itself had turned her pain into beauty. She held a cup of tea in her hands and smiled softly. It wasn't the kind of smile that came from pride or revenge. It was peace, deep and quiet. She remembered those nights she sat alone, promising herself that her tears would one day mean something. And now they had. Looking at the city lights below, she whispered, "They mocked my tears, but I returned laughing with power." Her voice trembled with emotion. This laughter wasn't loud, it was calm, healing, the kind that comes after you've survived everything meant to break you. She took a deep breath, watching the traffic lights twinkle like stars on the ground, and let out a soft laugh that came straight from her soul. She didn't need to prove anything anymore. The girl they laughed at had become the woman they now celebrated, and that, she knew, was the sweetest laughter of all.